I used to think I was just a soft dad. Lately, I've wondered if that was the polite word for enabler. It was a Tuesday in Westerville, Ohio, suburban quiet. Mail still rubber-banded on the counter when the brochures showed up. Not mine. Maui, ocean villas, black sand beaches, helicopter tours, the whole Instagram heaven. My daughter Emily fanned them out like playing cards on my kitchen table, the same table where I taught her algebra and how to balance a checkbook. "Dad," she said, a smile already loaded. "We've been planning a little getaway, for everyone's mental health." Jason, my son-in-law, had that managerial grin he wears when he's about to outsource a problem. The doorbell chimed and in floated his parents, Frank and Darlene, bearing a bottle of something tropical and two voices tuned to "gracious guest." I poured coffee. I waited for the part where they'd say, "You're coming with us, right?" It didn't come. "Flights are long," Jason offered, eyes sliding past me to his phone. 8 hours minimum. Connections. It's a lot. Emily tapped the brochure with a manicured nail. "Dad, you know your knees after 2 hours. Be honest." Frank chuckled like he was narrating a commercial. "Maui's a commitment." Darlene touched my shoulder, performative comfort. "You'll have the house to yourself. Peace and quiet. We'll FaceTime from the beach." We well so getting to as wrong to that place. I let the silence hold a beat. Outside, a leaf blower coughed to life 2 yards over. "So I'm not invited." "Not like that," Emily said, already shifting into gaslighting mode. "You are invited in spirit. But the logistics are easier if I'm not there," I finished. Jason exhaled relief, as if I'd done him a favor. "Exactly. Here's the math that never shows up on their spreadsheets. I'm 62, a retired math teacher with a mortgage-free house that became a lifeboat when Jason's crypto investments sank. 5 years of groceries, utilities, and temporary stays that calcified into a lifestyle. Somewhere along the way, I went from dad to subsidized background." Frank lifted his mug. "Mark, we'll bring you back Kona coffee, best on earth." I looked at his hands, steady, sun-tanned, 2 years older than mine. So I was too old to fly. But Frank wasn't. That's how narcissists do. Arithmetic age is not a number. It's a lever. Emily slid me a printed itinerary, my copy apparently, so I could track our flights. It had their names and frequent flyer numbers, hotel confirmation, even a line item for a private luau upgrade. No Mark Reynolds anywhere on it, just a sticky note. "Please water the snake plant." XO. My phone pinged. A new message on a group thread I didn't know existed. "Family trip logistics. Emily. Sent everyone the Delta confirmation. Frank, Darlene, room upgrade confirmed. Jason. Added our snorkeling reservation, kids are hyped. Frank. Heli tour booked. Emily. Dad will house sit. He loves routine." I stared at the heart. There are hearts that mean love, and hearts that mean ownership. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice level. "Let's talk plain. You think I'm a burden on this trip?" She flashed the smile that used to melt curfews. "Don't be toxic, Dad. We're protecting your comfort. Boundaries. Yours," I said. "Not mine." Darlene shifted in her seat. "We're trying to make it easy." "On who?" I asked. Jason cleared his throat. "Look, Mark, this is a family trip." I let that land. Then what am I? No one answered. Someone's phone cheered, "Flight deal alert." It struck me that I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines but me. "Timing's perfect," Emily said, plowing on. "We leave Saturday. 10 days. Could you stop by Chase this week and make sure your auto pay is set? If anything breaks, call a licensed contractor. Don't DIY it." I laughed short, tired. "You want me to manage the asset while you enjoy it?" Jason's jaw tightened. "It's your house, Mark, and you say that like it'll always be true," I replied. Emily tilted her head. "Don't be dramatic. You know what Mom used to say." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't rewrite your mother to win an argument." She pulled back like I'd slapped her. The truth is, I had just not with my hand. Frank tried a pivot. "So, logistics. We'll Uber to CMH, back by." "Hold on," I said. "Emily, when's the last time you looked at my will?" Silence. Then the wounded tone. "That's morbid." "It's adult," I said. "There's a signed copy in my safe with my bank accounts listed and a clause about residence rights. If you're going to assign me chores, I'm going to assign expectations." Jason scoffed. This is getting weird. And we did notice into the propest. What's weird, I said, is planning a vacation in my kitchen while pretending I'm not in the room. Emily's eyes flashed. Dad, you're making everything negative. You're reading malice into care. This is for your health. There it was. Polite coercion dressed as concern. Gaslighting in a cardigan. Then do me a favor, I said. Put that concern in writing. I pointed to the itinerary. Email me what you just said about my health and your plan for the house while you're gone. Include who's responsible for what, and your expected timelines. Call it house-sitting expectations. I'll reply with mine. Jason frowned. Why would we? Because written evidence prevents misunderstandings, I said. And I'm done living inside misunderstandings. The room cooled. Emily folded the brochure. This is why we didn't want to bring it up tonight. Because I'd say no? I asked. Because you'd make it hostile. She shot back. I looked at her, the little girl who once saved ticket stubs in a shoebox because memories are proof. Somewhere, the proof changed owners. Take your trip, I said. Enjoy Maui. Bring me back whatever you think I can't handle. Jason reached for a line that would end the scene. We'll text you the plant schedule. Do that, I said, picking up the itinerary. And Emily, check your email later. I'm sending you a copy of a letter I just updated. It's called Boundary Addendum to Will. Consider it mutual clarity. She blinked. A what? A line, I said. And you're about to find out which side you're on. My phone pinged again. Same thread, same heart. I set it face down and realized my hands weren't shaking. For the first time in 5 years, I felt steady. They kept talking about reefs and luaus. I started thinking about locks, deeds, and the clean sound a signature makes when you stop apologizing for having a spine. Next, the vent, the plan, and how quickly a house sitter can become a homeowner again. That night, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It hummed with other people's voices, their laughter, their future plans, like I was just a tenant who'd overstayed his lease. I couldn't sleep. I'd replayed that dinner scene in my head 100 times, each line sharper than before. Too old to fly. For your health. Boundaries. Boundaries. The words stuck like splinters. I sat up, reached for the lamp, and realized the light was already on downstairs. Muffled voices rose through the air, vents thin, metallic echoes from the living room. My first instinct was to tune it out. Privacy, right? But something in Jason's tone, low, conspiratorial, made me pause. Once he's settled, the house is basically ours. I froze. Emily's voice followed, softer, like she was smoothing the edges of something ugly. Don't say it like that. He'll be better off with care. You heard what Dr. Patel said, cognitive decline can accelerate without structure. I felt my stomach twist. Dr. Patel had said I was fine. Tired, maybe. Lonely, sure. But not senile. Jason laughed. We'll tell him it's temporary. A trial month at Oakwood Senior Living. Then once he's there, a pause. I could picture his hand slicing through the air. We'll list the house. My buddy at Pinnacle Realty says it could hit 800. Maybe more. Split 4 ways. Everyone wins. Everyone but me. Emily whispered something I couldn't catch. Then Darlene, Jason's mother, cut in, her tone businesslike. Just make sure you get the power of attorney squared away first. Banks won't talk to you otherwise. I already drafted the email, Emily said. Dad trusts me. I'll say it's for medical emergencies. He never reads the fine print anyway. I gripped the bed frame until my knuckles went white. The heating vent hissed quietly, carrying every syllable like a confession meant for me alone. Once that's done, Jason said, we pay the deposit for Oakwood, $3,000. Frank's covering it up front. Then we list with Pinnacle. Zach Ames owes me a favor. Zach Ames. I knew that name. He'd sent me postcards last year after the roof repair. Thinking of selling? Market's hot. I tossed them in the junk drawer. Apparently my daughter hadn't. I pressed my ear closer. Frank's gravelly voice. You'd better move fast. If he catches on, he could revoke the will. Emily chuckled, a sound that didn't belong to my child. He won't. He still thinks I'm that little girl who color-coded his lesson plans. He'll sign anything if I smile. They laughed, light, cruel laughter bouncing through the vent. It sounded like champagne glasses clinking at my own funeral. I sat back, dizzy. The carpet under my knees felt like sand, shifting, unreliable. 5 years. I'd kept them afloat for 5 years. Mortgage payments, groceries, daycare, utilities, Jason's failed crypto bets, and consulting work that somehow never paid. I'd told myself I was helping my family heal. That's the lie every enabler tells to make exploitation sound like love. Now they were plotting my removal like a corporate downsizing. Darlene's voice softened, like she was soothing herself. You're doing the right thing, honey. He'll have meals, nurses, social time, and the house will stay in the family. The family. I covered my mouth, afraid I'd shout. For them, I wasn't a father or a person. I was an asset class. Let's talk timing, Jason said. Flight Saturday. Closing paperwork prepped before we leave. Worst case, we handle signatures when we're back. The old man's too sentimental to touch the deed anyway. That's when something in me shifted quiet. Mechanical. Inevitable. A gear clicking into place. They'd built their little scheme on two assumptions. That I wouldn't hear them, and that I wouldn't fight back. They were about to be wrong on both counts. I stood, knees cracking in the dark, and walked to my dresser. Inside, beneath Sarah's jewelry box, was the deed to this house, my name. My signature, no co-owners, no mortgage. I traced the embossed stamp with my thumb and whispered to myself, let's see whose name means something now. Downstairs, Emily laughed again, bright and hollow. Mom would agree with us, she said. She always worried Dad couldn't manage alone. The lie hit harder than any slap. Sarah never said that. She'd built this home with me, nail by nail. She believed in my independence right up to her last breath. But Emily had rewritten her mother's memory to justify betrayal. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just greed, it was narcissism. The kind that erases truth and replaces it with self-serving fiction. I sat on the edge of the bed until their voices blurred into silence. My pulse slowed, deliberate, cold. The part of me that used to beg for understanding had gone quiet. They thought they were writing me out of my own story. Instead, they just handed me the plot twist. I reached for a notebook on my nightstand, old habit from teaching days, and wrote the date at the top. Thursday, 11:42 p.m. Under it, one line. He who controls the deed controls the ending. Then I closed the book, slid it under the mattress, and lay back in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me. Every vent, every wall, every floorboard, they'd all just switched sides. The house wasn't theirs. Not yet. And by the time I was done, it never would be. By morning, I felt like someone had taken sandpaper to my soul. I brewed coffee I didn't taste and stared out the kitchen window at the backyard swing set, the one I'd built for Emily's kids. The paint was peeling, chains squeaking in the wind. The silence in that house wasn't peace anymore. It was erasure. When Sarah was alive, mornings smelled like burnt toast and lilacs. Now it smelled like betrayal and reheated coffee. I sat at the table with my old leather notebook, the one I'd used for lesson plans back when I still believed in neat columns and balanced equations. That teacher part of me wanted numbers, proof, so I started listing it out. The way I used to grade papers, groceries, utilities, repairs, car insurance, daycare, a roof replacement, a temporary loan that never came back, line after line. When I was done, I added it up. $61,240. That number hit like a confession. That's how much I'd spent in the name of love. And love had turned into a line item they felt entitled to. I opened my phone, scrolled through text threads that read like a pattern of emotional extortion. Dad, Jason's hours got cut again. Dad, can you help just until next month? Dad, you know we'll pay you back. 5 years of just until next month. Reading those messages now, I could see every manipulation disguised as affection. They didn't just want my help. They wanted access to my wallet, to my guilt, to my quiet fear of being alone. That's the ugly trick of toxic families. They teach you that love is measured by how much pain you can endure for their comfort. At 10 a.m., I drove into town to see Dr. Patel, my therapist. I almost canceled the session, didn't want to sound like some melodramatic retiree whining about ungrateful kids. But she'd been Sarah's doctor once, and Sarah used to say, Patel doesn't sugarcoat. The office was quiet, faint smell of peppermint oil. Dr. Patel looked up from her notes. You look different today, Mark. Didn't sleep much, I said. She nodded. Waited the way good therapists do, so I told her. The overheard conversation, the nursing home plan, the fake concern, the gaslighting. Her eyes didn't widen. She just listened, pen tapping the page. When I was done, she said, You've been describing the same pattern for years: minimization, guilt-tripping, entitlement. The only new thing is that you finally believe it. I stared at her desk plant. So, what do I do? Cut them off? Not yet, she said. But stop enabling. Stop paying for the privilege of being disrespected. You've built your boundaries out of guilt. Build them out of truth instead. Boundaries, I repeated, like a foreign word. She smiled. Kindness isn't weakness, Mark. But silence in the face of manipulation? That is. I'm canned of that too. That line hit me harder than I expected. I think part of me had been waiting for someone to give me permission to stop apologizing for having limits. On the drive home, I kept hearing her voice. Silence is weakness. I stopped at the local credit union, the same one where I'd opened an account for Emily when she turned 16. Inside, I met with a young banker named Lisa. She couldn't have been older than my granddaughter. I told her I wanted to set up a new savings account and a certificate of deposit, both sole ownership, no beneficiaries listed yet. She smiled politely. Retirement fund, sir? Let's call it my freedom fund, I said. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and handed me a clipboard. I transferred a significant portion of my liquid savings, enough to live comfortably, enough to move fast if I had to. When I walked out, the winter air bit my face, but I felt lighter, like I'd just cut an invisible chain. That night, I found a voicemail from Emily. Her voice was honeyed, cheerful. Hey Dad. Just checking in. Don't forget to water the snake plant. Love you. The same voice that had plotted my institutional exile 2 nights ago. She'd said love you like it was punctuation. I didn't respond. Instead, I played the message again, then saved it. Evidence. I'd started building a paper trail, and it felt strangely empowering. I took photos of the deed, scanned my will, stored copies on a password-protected drive. Then I wrote one sentence in my notebook under that $61,240 total. A lesson unpaid is a lesson unlearned. The next morning, I called Ava Chen, a lawyer whose ad I'd seen in the Westerville Gazette. Elder rights, estate protection, discreet counsel. She sounded calm, efficient, like someone who'd seen every shade of family betrayal and stopped being surprised. Mr. Reynolds, she said, you're not the first client whose kindness was mistaken for weakness. Her words mirrored Dr. Patel's, almost verbatim. Then maybe it's time to teach a new definition, I said. Tell me everything, she replied. And for the first time in months, I did. I talked until my throat hurt about Sarah, about Emily, about the plan I wasn't supposed to hear. Ava didn't interrupt. When I was finished, she said quietly, you still have every card. They just don't realize it yet. That night, I sat at my desk, watching the cursor blink on an empty document. A plan was forming, not out of revenge, but out of correction, because this wasn't about punishing them. It was about reteaching the lesson they'd skipped, that generosity is a gift, not a right, that every boundary ignored eventually becomes a wall, and that the quiet ones remember everything. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and whispered the line that had carried me all day, half mantra, half warning. Kindness isn't weakness, it's just patience wearing armor. And mine had finally hardened. By the time I met Ava Chen, I'd stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. I'd spent a week turning guilt into documentation, scanning receipts, saving voicemails, logging every financial favor I'd loaned my daughter and her husband. Guilt had been replaced by something colder, cleaner: strategy. Ava's office sat above a bakery downtown, the kind of place that smells like sugar and stress. Her sign was small: Chen and Associates, Estate and Civil Law, but the brass letters had weight. When she opened the door, the first thing I noticed was how quiet she was. Not timid, just measured. Every word she spoke felt edited before it left her mouth. Mr. Reynolds? She asked, offering her hand. You mentioned on the phone this involves family and real property. I nodded. And boundaries. Her eyes flicked up from her notes, one brow raised. That's usually the real property at stake. We sat. I told her everything from Emily's too old to fly, insult to the overheard vent conversation about selling my house. She didn't interrupt, not even when I stumbled through the parts that still made my throat tighten. When I was done, she leaned back, folded her arms, and said, what they're planning isn't technically illegal yet, but it's heading there fast. Heading where? To coercion, financial abuse, maybe even fraud depending on the paperwork you sign. She asked if I had the deed. I slid a folder across the table. She studied it, tracing the notary stamp. Good. Clean title. No mortgage. No secondary lien. That's leverage. You hold every card, Mark. You just need to play them in order. I couldn't help smiling. I used to teach algebra. Order matters. That's good, she said, smiling faintly. Then this will make sense. Step 1. Secure your documents. Deed, will, bank records. Step 2. Create a firewall. A new checking account in your name only, no joint access, no beneficiaries. Step 3. Stay silent. Silent? She nodded. They can't defend against what they can't anticipate. Let them think they're still in control. You'll need proof of intent. Save every message, every voicemail, every email where they discuss your well-being. Those are your breadcrumbs. I laughed softly. Funny how breadcrumbs can lead the wolves instead of the lost ones. Ava tilted her head. You've got some fight left, Mr. Reynolds. That's good. Just promise me you won't confront them directly yet. I won't, I said. Not until the trap's set. And a never weak ass. She studied me for a moment, then opened a thin black notebook. Tell me about your will. When was the last update? 8 years ago. Sarah and I did it together. She left everything to Emily if I passed first. And now? Now, I said. Sarah's gone. And Emily's treating that house like her down payment on happiness. Ava jotted something down. We'll draft an amendment. You can transfer assets into a revocable trust, still yours, but untouchable by anyone else. It's reversible if you ever reconcile. But it keeps you safe until then. Safe. I tested the word like a foreign language. I haven't felt that in a long time. Safety's the foundation of boundaries, she said. People like your daughter and son-in-law narcissists. Entitled types, they depend on your confusion. Once you start defining things clearly, they lose their footing. Something about her tone, calm, surgical, made me trust her instantly. This wasn't pity. It was partnership. Before I left, she slid her business card across the desk. If they push you to sign anything, forward it to me first. Texts, letters, emails, bank forms, everything. I'll verify them. No signatures until I say so. I tucked the card into my wallet next to Sarah's photo. Miss Chen, I said, can I ask why you do this kind of work? Elder cases can't be very profitable. It was no pin like I day. She hesitated, then said, let's just say I've seen what happens when kindness is mistaken for incompetence. My mother went through something similar. I made it my career to make sure no one else does. It wasn't quite a confession, but it was enough. As I stepped out of her office, I realized I felt something I hadn't felt since before Sarah's death. Protected. Not because someone else was saving me, but because someone finally believed I was worth saving. Driving home, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The old me was all apology, shrinking to fit everyone else's comfort. The man gripping the steering wheel now had a plan, an ally, and a pulse of quiet rage he'd stopped confusing for guilt. Ava had called it coercion. I called it classroom payback, a life lesson for adults who never learned the math of consequences. That night, I placed her card on my desk beside the deed and whispered, let's begin. Saturday morning came like the punchline to a cruel joke. The house smelled of sunscreen and hotel shampoo. Suitcases blocked the hallway like a parade of entitlement. Emily hummed while checking boarding passes. Jason barked into his phone about rental cars. And his parents, Frank and Darlene, sat on my couch discussing which Hawaiian resort offered better buffet shrimp as if they'd earned the right to compare. I poured coffee I didn't need and watched the performance. They didn't even look nervous. That's the thing about entitled people, they mistake silence for consent. Dad, Emily said brightly, remember to take it easy while we're gone. You'll have the house to yourself for 10 whole days. I smiled, careful not to let it reach my eyes. I'll keep myself busy, she laughed. That's what worries me. She had no idea how busy I planned to be. When they finally left for the airport, the quiet that followed wasn't grief, it was liberation. I stood in the doorway, watching their Uber disappear down the street. And for the first time in years, the air felt mine again. No footsteps overhead, no forced laughter at dinner, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my pulse finally matching its rhythm. I made one call to Zachary Ames, the realtor whose name I'd overheard through the vent. He picked up on the second ring, voice slick with confidence. Zach Ames speaking. Mr. Ames, this is Mark Reynolds. I believe you've spoken with my son-in-law about this property. A pause. Ah, yes, I remember the name. Lovely home in Westerville, right? That's the one, I said. But there's been a change of plans. I'd like to list the property myself immediately. I'm the sole owner, no mortgage, clean title. There was a short silence, the kind that smells like commission. Understood, sir. Are you looking for a standard timeline? No. I need a cash buyer within 10 days. Price it below market if you have to. Fast, close, minimal contingencies. That's ambitious, he said, but I could already hear his fingers tapping his keyboard. If you're serious, I can be there this afternoon. Sirius is my middle name, I replied. When I hung up, I felt that same spark I used to feel before the first day of a new school year, the energy of a man with a plan. Next, I called Ava Chen. She answered with her usual calm. Talk to me, Mr. Reynolds. I'm moving forward. House goes on the market today. I've secured the deed, updated my will, and transferred funds into the trust you set up. I want everything airtight before they come back. There was a pause then, a smile in her voice. I assume you're documenting the process? Every signature, every message, every transaction. Good. And remember, no contact with your daughter until the sale closes. People like her sense control slipping and double down on manipulation. Silence is your best leverage. I know, I said. They'll find out soon enough. She exhaled softly. You sound different. Maybe because for once, I'm not apologizing for existing. I spent the rest of the morning gathering paperwork, title documents, inspection reports, insurance details. By noon, Zachary arrived, shaking my hand with the kind of vigor reserved for guaranteed commissions. Beautiful home, he said, glancing around. Mind if I ask why the rush? Let's just say I'm liquidating sentiment, I replied. He chuckled politely. I'll list it today, push it through our investor network. With the right buyer, you'll have offers by Monday. Perfect, I said. And Zachary, one more thing. If my daughter or her husband contacts you, refer them to my attorney. No discussions without her present. His eyebrows lifted. Understood. After he left, I walked through the empty rooms like a curator closing an exhibit. Every corner carried an echo of my old life. The sound of Sarah laughing as she burned Sunday pancakes. Emily practicing piano, the day Jason dragged in boxes and said, just for a few months. Each memory had been quietly rewritten by entitlement, but now I was editing it back. At 3 o'clock, I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Rosa, handed me a clipboard and a sympathetic smile. Downsizing? She asked. Let's call it reorganizing, I said. She gave me a key and a unit number. I hired movers to start boxing up their things, Emily's designer clothes, Jason's gaming gear. The in-laws' luggage stacked in my guest room like they lived there permanently. I labeled everything neatly, like I used to grade homework. Order brings clarity. By evening, the house looked different, lighter. My things remained. Photos of Sarah, my books. The good china she insisted we never use. Everything else, the clutter of dependency, was gone. I called Mrs. Whitaker, my next-door neighbor. She'd lived on this street longer than anyone and had witnessed more of my life than most of my family. Evening, Mark, she said. The circus finally left, huh? You could say that. I always wondered how you kept your patience, the way that son-in-law of yours barked orders. I smiled. Patience is just discipline waiting for a target. She laughed. Well, I'll keep an eye on the place if you need a witness for anything official. Actually, I said, I might. If anyone comes by claiming ownership or demanding entry, could you note the date and time? Maybe take a photo if it feels safe. Gladly, she said. And Mark, good for you. Boundaries make neighbors proud. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork and silence. The house creaked as if it, too, was exhaling relief. 5 years ago, I'd opened this home out of grief, trying to fill the hole Sarah left behind. But grief makes you generous in dangerous ways. It blurs the line between love and servitude. Now, finally, that line was clear. They thought I was just house-sitting my own life. They had no idea I was reclaiming it. Before going to bed, I scribbled a note in my journal. Kindness needs rules, otherwise it becomes a weapon for those without conscience. The ink bled slightly on the paper, spreading like a signature that refused to stay contained. Tomorrow, the first buyers would come, and somewhere between signatures and silence, I'd start to feel like myself again. By Monday morning, The only sound in the house was the low hum of the ceiling fan and the scrape of cardboard against wood. Every box I sealed felt like closing a chapter I'd been too polite to end. The movers came early, 2 college kids in matching shirts, polite but curious. "Whole house?" one of them asked. "Not quite," I said. "Just the parts that don't belong to me anymore." They nodded and got to work. I had already labeled everything with neat handwriting. Emily, bedroom, Jason, office, Frank and Darlene, guest room. The rest of the space looked strangely bare, like the house had exhaled after holding its breath for 5 years. It was a strange kind of grief, boxing up things that weren't even mine, not because I missed them, but because I'd finally stopped pretending they meant something. The expensive handbags, the temporary gaming setup, the souvenirs from vacations I'd paid for but never joined, they were props in a story I no longer wanted a role in. By noon, I followed the moving truck to the storage facility on the edge of town. Rosa, the manager, greeted me with that same gentle curiosity. "You again, Mr. Reynolds. Making more space for peace?" "That's exactly what I'm buying," I said. She handed me a clipboard for the final paperwork, and I signed without hesitation. "Unit 143, she said. "Climate controlled. 6 months prepaid." I watched as the movers unloaded everything, careful, professional, efficient. When they were done, I stepped inside the unit. Rows of boxes lined the walls, each one sealed with blue tape. The air smelled like cardboard enclosure. "This'll do," I told Rosa. "If anyone comes asking, tell them it's secure. And tell them I said thank you." Driving back, the sun dipped low over the cul-de-sac. The kind of soft orange light Sarah used to call forgiving light. I parked in front of the house and just sat there for a moment, staring at it, the place that had once felt like a sanctuary, then slowly became a cage. Inside, the emptiness was shocking. My footsteps echoed. The living room looked bigger without their clutter, and the walls seemed lighter. It felt like the house had shed its skin. I opened the windows and let the air move freely for the first time in years. That night, I carried the last of my personal things into the small apartment I'd rented on Uptown Main Street, not far from the library. A 1-bedroom with pale walls, clean floors, and a kitchen the size of a classroom desk. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every inch of it belonged to me. I hung one framed photo of Sarah above the dresser, the one where she's laughing mid-sentence, sunlight catching her hair. Then I unpacked my teaching awards, my books, a few shirts, my father's watch, essentials only. Standing there, surrounded by simplicity, I realized I wasn't downsizing, I was detoxing. The first night in that apartment was silent in a way that wasn't empty. It was peaceful. No doors slamming, no whispered arguments downstairs, no guilt trips disguised as concern, just the rhythmic tick of the wall clock and the distant hum of passing traffic. For the first time in years, I didn't have to justify my existence to anyone. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and made coffee in a pot half the size of the one at home. I drank it by the window, watching the town wake up. Across the street, a young couple walked their dog. They laughed, nudged each other, unaware of the older man watching them reclaim his morning. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. "Freedom doesn't come loud. It arrives quietly, disguised as routine." Later that day, I drove back to the house to pick up mail and check on things before the realtor's next showing. Walking through the empty rooms, I realized how different it felt without their noise. No perfume lingering in the hallway, no toys on the floor, no voices competing for attention. Just light, space, and the faint echo of what used to be love. In the kitchen, the table where everything started stood bare except for a small note I'd left on purpose. "Emily, your things are safe. So am I." I didn't owe her an explanation, only the truth. When I locked the front door for what might be the last time, my hand didn't shake. The key turned smoothly, the click final but gentle. As I walked down the path to my car, a breeze lifted through the maple trees, scattering a few leaves across the lawn. I took that as Sarah's way of saying finally. Back at my apartment, I placed the house key in a small glass bowl on the counter, the same bowl Sarah once filled with seashells. It wasn't a trophy. It was evidence of survival. That evening, Mrs. Whitaker called. "Mark, the place looks lovely from here," she said. "Peaceful." I saw the realtor's sign. "Must feel strange. It feels like fresh air," I told her. "Well," she said, "it's about time you got some." After we hung up, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, surrounded by quiet. My kind of quiet. I thought about Ava's words about boundaries, clarity, and control, and realized this was what it looked like in practice. No confrontation, no shouting match, just the steady reclaiming of space, inch by inch, until peace had nowhere left to hide. Before bed, I wrote one more line in my notebook, right under yesterday's entry. You can't lose a home that was already gone. You can only build a new one inside yourself. And for the first time in years, I slept straight through the night. 10 days passed before the first call came. Emily's name lit up my phone just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. I didn't answer. I wanted to, out of old habit, the reflex of a father who still believed every dad was born from love instead of convenience. But that part of me had retired. She left a voicemail. Cheerful at first, her tone like sugar dissolving in acid. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hawaii's amazing. You'd love it here. The kids keep asking about you. Pause. A sigh. Anyway, hope you're doing okay. Don't forget to water the ferns. I deleted it without listening to the rest. 2 days later, she called again. This time the tone was brisk, managerial. Dad, we found a senior center near you that sounds perfect. Oakwood Village. They have private rooms and weekly outings. We can talk more when we get back. I already sent them some of your info, so don't be surprised if they call. That's when I stopped being angry. Anger still gives people space in your head. What I felt now was colder, final, like the air after a storm. That night, I called Ava. Everything's in place, I said. The sale closes Monday. Good, she said. And you've transferred the funds? All of it. Trust finalized. Lease signed for the apartment. And your daughter still thinks you're home? She'll find out soon enough. There was a brief silence before she added, Mark, when this ends, don't call it revenge. Call it correction. Correction, I repeated. I like that. Monday morning, I signed the final paperwork. The notary's pen clicked like a gavel. By noon, the house that had been my family's stage for years belonged to a faceless investment company. The wire hit my account before lunch. I walked out with only one small box, Sarah's photo, my notebooks, and the letter I'd written to Emily months earlier but never mailed. It simply said, you can't inherit what you destroyed. That night, I booked a flight. Not to run away, but to claim what was rightfully mine. The vacation they said I was too old for. The irony made me smile. 2 days later, I landed in Maui, the same island. Emily had declared too much adventure for me. The hotel was quiet, modern, with an ocean view so wide, it felt like the world had reset itself. I paid in full, in cash, from the proceeds of the house sale. That first morning, I stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the same sunrise my daughter had probably filmed for her social feed. It looked different when you'd earned it. Then, like clockwork, my phone started ringing again. Lauren, Jason, unknown numbers, Hawaii area codes. I didn't answer any of them. By late afternoon, I got a text from Mrs. Whitaker, my neighbor back home. They're back. 4 of them. Looked confused, then panicked. I could picture it, the rental car pulling up. The moment of hesitation at the door. The key that no longer fit the lock. Another text came minutes later. New owners handled it well. Showed them the deed. Your daughter's crying. The husband's yelling about lawyers. I didn't reply right away. I just took another sip of coffee and let the image settle. The same people who once laughed through the vent about putting me away now standing outside a house that wasn't theirs anymore. Mrs. Whitaker texted again. They asked where you went. I told them I didn't know. They looked lost. I wrote back one word. Perfect. My phone began lighting up like a slot machine. Missed calls, voicemails, frantic texts. 43 in total. The first one was all fury. Dad, what the hell is going on? Strangers are in the house. Call me back. Then came bargaining. Dad, we can fix this. Just talk to us. Then pleading. Please, Dad. We have nowhere to go. I didn't reply. Each message was a reminder of how quickly power changes hands once the illusion of control is gone. That evening, I sat by the beach, letting the sound of the waves replace the sound of their voices. The sunset burned gold and violet across the sky, and I realized something that made me laugh out loud. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't vindicated either. I was free. Emily had wanted to teach me dependence, to make me accept care I didn't need. Instead, she'd forced me to remember the part of myself that never needed permission to act. The phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then, Out of curiosity, I opened one voicemail, the last one. Her voice was raw, stripped of all the practiced confidence. "Dad, please. We were wrong. We shouldn't have done what we did. I don't know where to go. The kids are scared. We just need to talk." The wind picked up, carrying her words into the surf. I deleted the message and whispered into the night. "So did I, Emily. I just needed to talk." 5 years ago, I ordered room service, grilled fish, white wine, and raised my glass toward the ocean. Not a toast to revenge, but to closure. Before bed, I emailed Ava one line. "Transaction complete, lesson delivered." She replied an hour later. "Justice doesn't always roar, Mark. Sometimes it just signs its name, and tell you to me." I smiled, closed my laptop, and stood on the balcony one last time. Below, the waves moved like time itself, steady, irreversible. Somewhere, back home, my daughter was learning her first real adult lesson, that when you build your life on someone else's generosity, eventually the ground moves, and when it does, you fall alone. I woke up the next morning to sunlight pouring through the hotel curtains like it was personally forgiving me. The ocean outside was calm, steady, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm has run its course. For the first time in years, I didn't wake to guilt or noise or someone else's needs. Just the sound of waves and my own breathing. I ordered breakfast to the balcony, black coffee, scrambled eggs, a bowl of fruit, and ate slowly, watching the world go on. People walked the beach below. Families laughing, couples taking photos, kids chasing the tide. It looked like any other morning in paradise. But for me, it felt like graduation day. After I finished eating, I opened my notebook. I'd been keeping notes since all this began, small lines, thoughts, reminders that helped me stay grounded. That morning, I wrote one final entry at the top of a clean page. "Some lessons you can't teach gently." That was the truth of it. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone. I'd simply stopped allowing myself to be destroyed. When you spend years as the good guy, people start believing they can rewrite your boundaries for you. They mistake your patience for surrender, your generosity for obligation, and your love for permission. And when you finally stop, when you draw the line, they call it cruelty. But it isn't cruelty, it's balance. The difference between revenge and justice is intention. Revenge wants to make someone suffer. Justice wants to restore order. I wasn't looking for pain, I was looking for peace. Later that afternoon, I got an email from Ava Chen with the subject line, "Confirmation of transfer." The funds from the house sale had officially settled into the trust. The message ended with one sentence. "Congratulations, Mr. Reynolds, you're untouchable." Untouchable. That word didn't sound proud or arrogant. It sounded protected. I closed the laptop, walked down to the beach, and let the water hit my ankles. It was colder than I expected, real, grounding. I thought about Sarah and how she used to say, "There's peace in knowing where you stand." I finally understood what she meant. For years, I'd stood in the middle of chaos, trying to fix, to soothe, to help people who only saw my help as their right. And maybe that was my flaw. Maybe I'd been too afraid of being alone, too addicted to being needed. But standing there, feet sinking into wet sand, I realized something quietly profound. Being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. I wasn't lonely anymore. I was free. That night, I took out my phone and listened to one last voicemail, the 43rd call from Emily that I hadn't deleted. Her voice was calmer now, almost hollow. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry." I didn't cry. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt distance. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to swim back toward people who keep pulling you under. I didn't return the call. Instead, I sent a short email to Ava. "Please release the storage unit information to Emily. Their things are paid up for 6 months. After that, it's their responsibility." She replied within minutes. "Understood. I'll make sure it's handled respectfully." Oh, that word again, respect. It's such a simple word, but it's the hardest thing to demand from people who've learned to take you for granted. That evening, I walked along the shoreline as the sun began to set, the sky bleeding orange into purple, the same sun Emily and Jason had watched days before, believing they'd outsmarted me. Maybe, in some way, this was the most poetic ending I could have asked for. We both got what we thought we wanted, freedom. Only mine was real. As I turned back toward the hotel, I passed an elderly couple holding hands, moving slowly, laughing about something small. It reminded me of Sarah. I smiled, not with sadness this time, but gratitude. I'd finally honored her the way she would have wanted, not by clinging to what was broken, but by protecting what was whole. That night, I sat on the balcony with my journal, listening to the quiet. I wrote the final entry beneath the others, the ink drying under the soft Hawaiian breeze. Forgiveness isn't always about them. Sometimes it's just the peace that follows justice. Then I closed the notebook, placed it beside Sarah's photo, and whispered, "Lesson delivered. Time seeing the readers." Because in the end, this wasn't a story about a man getting even. It was a story about a man remembering his worth and finally taking it back. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you. Not like a grand revelation or a fireworks moment, more like sunlight through blinds after a long night. Quiet, subtle, but unmistakable. It's been 3 weeks since I sold the house. I'm still in Maui. I tell myself I'll head home soon, but every morning when I wake to the sound of the waves and the smell of salt and coffee, I find another reason to stay. Maybe I'm not avoiding home, maybe I'm redefining what that word means. I still get messages from Emily, not angry ones anymore, just short texts that trail off like she's afraid of her own voice. "Dad, we're staying at a motel for now. The kids keep asking about you. I know I crossed a line. I just don't know how to fix it." Sometimes I type a response and delete it before sending. Not out of spite, but because I've realized that silence can be kinder than false hope. She doesn't need words right now. She needs consequences, something the world rarely gives people who are used to being forgiven too easily. One afternoon, I sat at the little wooden desk in my hotel room and began writing a letter. Not to send, but to say everything I'd never said aloud. I wrote it longhand, the way I used to write Sarah notes on her birthday. "Dear Emily, you once asked me what being a parent really means. I told you it was about showing up, about doing the hard things even when they hurt. I didn't realize how true that would become. I've spent years giving you comfort at the cost of my own dignity, mistaking rescue for love. I taught you generosity, but I forgot to teach you respect, and that's my failure as much as yours. You didn't steal from me, Emily. You took advantage of a silence I allowed to grow too large. I thought keeping the peace would keep us close. Instead, it taught you that love never pushes back. You were wrong about me being too old for adventure. What I'm doing now, is the adventure. Learning to live without permission. Finding out who I am when I'm not defined by what I give away. I don't hate you. I just finally stopped helping you hurt me. And I hope one day, when the noise fades, you'll understand that this was the first real act of love I've given you in years, because it came with boundaries. Tell the kids I love them. Tell them their grandfather learned something important. That kindness without self-respect isn't virtue, it's self-erasure. Love, Dad." When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it inside the back of my journal, behind the last page. Not to forget it, but to remind myself that sometimes closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's simply deciding not to open it again. That night, I had dinner at a small cafe by the beach. The waiter was a young guy, early 20s, sunburned, smiling like life hadn't had time to teach him caution yet. When he set down my check, he said, "You're here alone, sir? Must be nice. Most people can't handle their own company." I laughed. Took me 62 years to learn how. He smiled, but I could tell he didn't understand. That's okay. Some lessons don't make sense until you've paid for them in full. After dinner, I walked along the shoreline, the moon lighting up the sand like silver dust. The tide came in gentle waves, washing over my feet, retreating just as quietly. Somewhere behind me, a couple was arguing, voices rising, then softening. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, thinking how familiar that used to feel. The endless cycle of words that fix nothing. Now, silence felt like a language I finally spoke fluently. Before heading back to the hotel, I pulled out my phone and opened one last text from Emily. It said, "I hope you're safe, Dad. I really do." For a moment, I almost replied. Then I just typed 3 words and left them unsent. "So am I." I locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket. Back in my room, I placed Sarah's photo on the nightstand. Her smile looked different now, less like memory, more like approval. I whispered, "You were right, love. I just needed time." Quote. Then I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat on the balcony, the night air soft against my skin. The ocean kept whispering the same word over and over. in the rhythm of its waves, enough, enough, enough. And for once, it wasn't a plea. It was a declaration, because I finally understood something no one had ever taught me. You don't have to lose everything to start over. You just have to stop giving everything away. I closed my eyes, breathed in the salt and quiet, and let the lesson settle where guilt used to live. Tomorrow, I'd fly home not to rebuild, but to live differently. My new house would be smaller, my circle smaller still, but my peace finally would be vast. Coming home felt different this time. Not the old home. Of course the house was gone. Papers signed, keys turned in, but the return to Ohio, to myself. The air felt heavier, sharper, like winter was trying to remind me who I used to be. But I didn't flinch. The new apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar. One bedroom, one window facing east, and a little balcony just big enough for a chair and a pot of Sarah's favorite lilies. I unpacked my life into drawers, each item a reminder of what I'd chosen to keep and what I'd finally let go. The first few mornings, I woke expecting to hear children thundering down the stairs, or Jason's voice booming from the kitchen, or Emily calling, "Dad, have you seen my keys?" But there was only quiet, not the lonely kind, the healing kind. I started walking again. Every morning, down to the park where Sarah and I used to read on Sundays. I'd take a thermos of coffee and sit by the pond, feeding the ducks like I had when Emily was small. The same bench was still there, initials carved into the wood mine. Hers, Sarah's. For a moment, I ran my hand across the letters. The grooves were deeper than I remembered. Like time had chosen to honor what I couldn't. One morning, Mrs. Whitaker stopped by. She was bundled in her red scarf, cheeks pink from the cold. "Place suits you," she said, glancing around the apartment. "Feels peaceful." "It is," I said. "It's the kind of peace that doesn't need anyone's approval." She smiled knowingly. "That's the best kind." Before she left, she handed me an envelope. "This came for you at the old address, forwarded through my box, from Hawaii." I hesitated, then opened it after she'd gone. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Emily's handwriting uneven, rushed. "Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted to thank you for keeping our things safe. I found the letter in your notebook. I don't know how you meant for me to see it, but I did. You were right about everything. I've started therapy. I'm working. We're trying to rebuild. I hope one day we can talk again. I miss you. Love, Emily." For a long time, I just stared at the paper. There was no anger left in me to burn through. Only the quiet recognition that maybe, just maybe, the story hadn't ended in punishment after all. Maybe it ended in education. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my journal, right next to the first page where I'd written months ago. "He who controls the deed controls the ending." Heaven rupens, but I'd been wrong. Controlling the ending wasn't the point. Owning it was. That night, I met Ava for dinner downtown. She'd been handling the last bits of the estate transfer. We sat at a small Italian restaurant, the kind with dim lights and too much violin in the background. She ordered tea, I ordered wine. "How's retirement treating you?" she asked. "I finally understand it," I said. "Retirement isn't about stopping work. It's about ending the kind that drains you." She smiled. "And your daughter?" I hesitated. "I got a letter. She's trying." "That's something," she said softly. "Most don't." I nodded. "You were right, you know. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. But maybe—" I swirled the wine in my glass, correction for both of us. We finished dinner, and when we stepped outside, snow had started to fall. It was that soft, powdery kind that melts on your coat before you can brush it off. Ava offered me her hand. "You did the right thing, Mark. Some people just need a boundary strong enough to trip over before they see it." I walked her to her car and watched the taillights disappear down the street. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of everything that had happened. I felt light. When I got home, I sat on the balcony, the cold nipping at my fingers, and opened my notebook one last time. I wrote slowly, deliberately, the words coming like they'd been waiting all along. I used to think forgiveness meant letting them back in. Now I know it just means letting myself out. The city below was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. The streetlight flickered over the empty sidewalk. I thought about Sarah, how she'd laugh at how dramatic I'd been through all this, and I smiled. She'd probably say, "About time you learned to stand up straight, Mr. Reynolds." I leaned back, looking up at the first snowflakes falling against the black sky. and felt that rare kind of stillness that doesn't ask for anything. Not justice, not apology, just acknowledgement. That's what freedom really is, not the absence of pain, but the absence of permission for it. And as I closed the notebook and set it on the table beside me, I whispered the same words I'd written on its first page, now with a new meaning. He who controls the deed controls the ending. Only this time, I smiled and added under my breath, and I've already turned the page. Reddit-style ending. Protecting peace isn't cruelty, it's clarity. If there's one thing this whole story taught me, it's that protecting your peace doesn't make you heartless, it makes you human. For years, I confused love with tolerance, thinking that being the bigger person meant swallowing every insult and forgiving every betrayal. But the truth is, constantly setting yourself on fire to keep others warm isn't kindness. It's self-destruction with good intentions. The biggest lesson I learned: no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation for guarding your boundaries. When you stop letting guilt dictate your choices, you start healing. And healing doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it looks like walking away, selling the house, and refusing to answer 43 missed calls. There's peace on the other side of silence. Real peace, not the fragile kind that depends on other people behaving better, but the steady kind that comes from finally deciding you deserve respect, even if it means losing those who refuse to give it. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped allowing them to destroy me. And maybe that's what growth really looks like. Not revenge, not victory, but freedom. So, tell me, AITA, am I the asshole for what I did? Would you have handled it differently? Or maybe you've had to cut ties with an entitled family member before. How did you find peace after walking away? Share your thoughts below. Because if you've ever had to choose between guilt and sanity, you already know choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival.